He only wanted to escape poverty, but the ocean demanded his soul in return. In a forgotten coastal village of Ghana, a humble tailor named Kofi made a pact with a powerful spirit to change his fate. He found gold in his well, wealth beyond imagination, and the respect he had begged for all his life. But beneath the surface of every coin, something ancient and dark stirred. His wife began to hear voices in the walls. His child stopped speaking, and the once silent sea began to whisper his name. Now the river is rising, and what it gave, it has come to reclaim. Not his house, not his land, his blood. This is not just a story of ambition. It's a story of sacrifice, of love twisted by greed, and a price no father should ever pay. If you believe that no fortune is worth a child's soul, comment, "Not all gold is a blessing." The sound of the ocean had always been Kofi's lullaby, but that night it sounded different, darker, heavier, as if the sea was carrying secrets in its waves. In his tiny tailor shop, the candle flickered, casting trembling shadows over his rough hands. He stared at the fabric before him, a once beautiful kente cloth, now stained and torn beyond repair. It had belonged to a widow who begged him to fix it for her late husband's memorial, but Kofi had no thread left, no buttons, not even the strength to apologize. Outside, voices rose. Men laughed, not kindly. The debt collectors. "You think we'll wait forever, Taylor?" one of them barked. "I just need a few more days," Kofi replied, stepping into the moonlight. His shirt clung to his back with sweat. "I'm expecting a payment." They sneered. "You've been saying that for months." Kofi lowered his eyes as they walked away, kicking dust into his doorstep. Behind him, his wife, Ajoa, stood holding their son, silent as a stone. Inside the house, the child whimpered. Ajoa rocked him gently, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not your fault," she told her husband. "This world is cruel to honest men." But Kofi didn't want honesty anymore. He wanted freedom. He wanted to eat without shame, to walk the village square without hearing laughter behind his back. He wanted his son to sleep without coughing, to have shoes that didn't cut into his skin. Later that night, he stood by the shoreline, waves licking his feet. A drunk fisherman spoke to him in slurred riddles. "They say she lives where the river kisses the sea, the woman who makes men kings, Mama Ebele. You give her what she asks, and the spirits open your path." The name hung in the air like incense. Kofi had heard it before, in murmured gossip, in cautionary tales, but now it sounded like hope. The next day, at dawn, he left. He walked for hours along a narrow path carved between salt trees and thick marshes. The river of Okumo ran beside him, quiet, wide, ancient. Birds did not sing here. The silence was alive. At the end of the trail stood a hut made of dark wood and palm leaves. Smoke curled from a fire pit, and there, kneeling by the riverbank, was Mama Ebele. She did not look up. Her hands moved slowly over a wooden bowl filled with something red. Blood, maybe. Around the bowl, palm leaves fanned out in a perfect circle. Her lips moved in chant, her voice too low to understand. Kofi hesitated. "Are you her?" he asked. She did not speak. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I need help. I want to change my life. I have nothing left." Only then did she raise her eyes. They were clouded, as if seeing things beyond the world in front of her. "You ask for paths to open," she said. "But you don't ask where they lead." "I don't care," he said, swallowing hard. "I'll go anywhere but here." She dipped her fingers into the blood and pressed a mark onto his forehead. "The spirits do not give without cost," she warned. "When the tide rises, you will return what the river asks of you." Kofi didn't blink. "I accept." Her face did not soften. She handed him a bundle of dried herbs and turned back to the river, saying nothing more. As he walked away, the wind shifted. The air grew thicker. The trees seemed to lean in as if listening, and behind him, the river whispered his name for the first time. The morning sun had barely climbed above the horizon when Kofi awoke to the sound of dripping water. At first, he thought it was rain, but the sky was clear, no clouds, no wind. The sound came from behind the house, from the old stone well that had run dry for nearly 2 seasons. Curious, he stepped outside, barefoot, the earth still damp with dew. The sound grew louder. As he approached the well, a strange scent met his nose, something metallic, earthy, and sweet. He peered over the edge. Sunlight touched something glinting deep inside. His breath caught gold. Not 1 or 2 pieces, but several ancient coins, scattered among shimmering stones the color of fire. He blinked, thinking it must be a trick of the light, but the vision remained. A breeze swept over his shoulders, and the same whispering voice from the river echoed faintly in his ears. Kofi reached in, scooping up the treasures with shaking hands. By midday, he had walked into the village square, his old clothes replaced by a new, clean tunic. The market women, who once ignored him, now greeted him with wide smiles and eager eyes. He bought food, fresh bread, smoked fish, and papayas ripe with juice. Then he returned home with his arms full and his pockets heavier than ever. Ajoa stared at the goods, stunned. "Kofi, where did all this come from?" "The well," he said simply, almost laughing. "The well gave it to me." Her brows furrowed. "You mean someone left it there, a traveler?" "No," he whispered, leaning in. "The river kept its promise. That night, they ate like royalty." Their son giggled for the first time in days. Kofi watched his wife smile across the table, and something warm bloomed in his chest, a mix of pride, triumph, and something else he couldn't yet name. In the following weeks, everything changed. He paid off the debt collectors with ease. Then he bought the land behind his shop. Within a month, he hired 5 young men to work under him, each one calling him Master Kofi, with awe in their voices. The villagers began to speak of him in hushed admiration. "The blessed man," they called him, "a man the spirits have favored." Every time Kofi passed through the village square, hands greeted him, children ran to follow his steps, and even the elders bowed their heads in quiet respect. His shop turned into a factory. He dressed in imported cloths, his shoes shining with polish, and still the well never emptied. But not everything was gold and praise. Ajoa grew quieter each night. She often stared at their son as he slept, her hand brushing his curls absent-mindedly, her eyes clouded with worry. "Why can't you be happy for us?" Kofi asked her one evening, frustration creeping into his voice. "Do you not see the blessing we've received?" "I see it," she replied, not looking at him. "I see it in your eyes, in your hands, in the way the boy sometimes flinches in his sleep. Blessings don't come this easily, Kofi. Not without shadows following them." He scoffed. "You sound like those old women who curse fortune just because they never found it." But that night, as he lay awake beside her, he heard it again, the sound of dripping water. And this time, he wasn't sure if it was coming from the well or from the walls. At dawn, he walked to the back of the house. The well sat there, quiet as ever, yet a single coin rested on the stone rim, wet and gleaming, as if it had just surfaced. Kofi took it in his hand. It was colder than before, and for a brief moment it pulsed like a heartbeat. The nights began to stretch longer, though the days remained the same. It was a quiet shift, so quiet that Kofi didn't notice it at first. But Ajoa did. She was the first to say it. "There's something wrong with the house," she murmured one evening as they sat in silence. The boy was asleep, curled on a mat near the window. Kofi didn't look up from his plate. "You're just not used to peace." "No, it's too quiet, not peaceful, empty, like something's waiting." Kofi sighed. "You always find a reason to worry." But she wasn't imagining it. The whispers came first, soft, like a breeze slipping through the cracks in the wood. Sometimes in the middle of the night, Ajoa would wake to the sound of murmuring just outside their window. She'd light a lamp, look outside, and find nothing. But the air would smell strange, briny like the sea, sharp with something rotten beneath it. Their son began to wake in the dark, crying, pointing toward corners of the house and saying, "She's here, she's watching." Adjoa would hold him tightly, brushing his hair back, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "There's no one here, my love. You're safe." But when she turned off the lamp, she felt it too, that presence. Like eyes behind the wall, like water running just beneath the floorboards. The gold hadn't stopped. In fact, it multiplied. More coins, more stones. Every few days, something new surfaced in the well. Rings, small sculptures, even a dagger carved with symbols they didn't recognize. Kofi stored them all in a locked chest beneath their bed. One morning, Adjoa opened it when he wasn't looking. She gagged. The money, once bright and beautiful, now reeked. The smell of salt and rotting fish poured out of the chest. The notes were damp, stuck together as if pulled from the ocean floor. Some had barnacles growing along the edges. When she showed Kofi, he waved it off. "It's old. That's why it smells." "No," she snapped. "It's not old. It's cursed. Don't talk like that." "Then listen." Her voice cracked. "The well is bleeding. The house is sick. Our son is seeing things. This isn't prosperity, Kofi. It's a warning." He stared at her, breathing hard, the muscles in his jaw tense. "Do you think I wanted this out of greed?" he asked. "I did this for us, for our son, so we wouldn't have to beg or borrow, so we could walk like people." Adjoa's eyes filled with tears. "Then you should have asked what it would cost." Later that week, she left early in the morning without telling him. She walked all the way to the river of Okumo, her feet blistering, her throat dry from the heat. Mama Ebele was already there, kneeling by the water as if she had never moved. Adjoa stood several paces away, afraid to go closer. "I know what he did," she said, her voice shaking, "and I know it was you who opened the way." Mama Ebele didn't answer. She didn't even lift her head. "Tell me what to do," Adjoa begged. "Please, tell me how to stop it." The priestess only turned her face toward the horizon, toward the sea. A single tear slid down her cheek, and her voice, barely above a whisper, floated back to Adjoa like smoke. "The river always collects what it is owed." Kofi sat on the edge of his bed, his hands pressed against his temples, sweat trickling down the sides of his face, though the room was cool. The whispers had grown louder, no longer fleeting or faint. They came in waves now, soft voices speaking in tongues, circling his ears like flies. And then there was his son. The boy no longer laughed, no longer cried. He stared into empty corners, unmoving for hours, as if listening to something only he could hear. His skin had turned pale, his eyes sunken and tired, and at night he muttered the same words again and again. "She's calling, she's calling." Adjoa refused to let Kofi touch him anymore. She slept with the child pressed against her chest, like a shield. Her gaze no longer held fear. It held blame. "You did this," she whispered once, when she thought he was asleep. But Kofi wasn't sleeping anymore. On the 5th morning, the boy collapsed. They found him by the doorway, cold and shaking, foam at the edge of his mouth. Adjoa screamed his name and gathered him into her arms, sobbing into his neck, rocking back and forth on the dirt floor. Kofi didn't move. He stared at his son's limp form, and something inside him broke, not with sound, but with silence, the kind that follows a scream too loud for the body to release. Before sunrise, he went back to the river. Mama Ebele was there, as always, but this time, she looked up before he spoke. Her eyes, white and clouded, glinted with something heavy, ancient. She didn't need to ask why he had come. "You lied to me," Kofi said, stepping closer. "You told me the river would ask for something, but you didn't say what." "I said exactly what was true," she replied calmly. "The river asks for what it is owed." "It wants my son," she nodded. Kofi's voice rose with desperation. "He's a child. He didn't make the deal. I did." "The blood that brought the gold to your house was never yours alone," she said. "You are your lineage. Your blood flows into his. The river sees no separation." He fell to his knees. "Please, take something else. Take everything else." "There is no bargain left to make," she said, almost gently. "No," he whispered. "There must be a way. I'll undo it. I'll give the gold back. I'll drain the well. Burn it all." Mama Ebeli's face was unmoved. She stood and stepped toward him, her voice low and final. "You did not make a deal with the river, Kofi. You drank from the heart of Mami Wata. She gives only to those who carry the weight of her gaze. And when she gives, she marks." Kofi looked down at his hands, his skin dark but now threaded with faint shimmering lines, like veins made of silver, pulsing beneath the surface. "The mark? What does she want now?" he asked, barely able to form the words. "She wants what belongs to her." He shook his head, gripping the earth beneath him. "No, I won't give her my son." Mama Ebeli stared at him with sadness so deep it felt like mourning. "Then she will come for more." Kofi returned home in silence. His son lay unconscious, breath shallow. Adjoa sat beside him, eyes hollow. "She told you, didn't she?" Adjoa asked without looking up. "You made a deal with something you don't understand." "I'll fix it," he said. Adjoa's voice cracked as she spoke. "You can't fix a curse, Kofi. You live with it, or you pay it." And outside, the wind had changed direction. The waves could be heard from the edge of the village, louder now, closer, as if the sea itself had begun to move inland. Kofi no longer dreamed. Each night he lay awake listening, to the walls, to the waves, to the slow, fragile breath of his son fading beside him. The silence was no longer empty. It pulsed, it breathed, it waited. He had tried everything. He threw the gold back into the well. Every coin, every gem, every glittering offering he had once praised as salvation, gone. He sealed the mouth of the well with stones and firewood. He scattered ash around the yard, murmuring half-remembered prayers from his grandmother's tongue. And when none of it worked, he packed a bag in the dark and took his family inland. They walked for 2 days, away from the coast toward the forest villages. Adjoa said nothing to him. She carried their son wrapped in cloth against her back, her eyes swollen from crying but dry now, fixed forward like she was afraid to blink. They found shelter in a cousin's home far from the sea, surrounded by thick trees and hills. For a moment, Kofi allowed himself to believe they were safe, but on the second night, the water returned, not in waves or rain, but in whispers. His son began to cough in his sleep, his lips tinged blue in the morning. The floor beneath their bed was damp. Adjoa opened the door and screamed, fish bones arranged in a perfect circle on the threshold. That night, Kofi sat by the fire, clutching a burning stick like a weapon, his hands shaking. "She followed us," Adjoa said softly behind him. "You thought you could outrun the ocean." "She's a spirit," he replied through gritted teeth. "Spirits can be tricked. You didn't trick her. You invited her. You drank from her hands. I didn't know what she was," Adjoa's voice was flat, "and now she knows your name." In the morning, their hosts refused to let them stay. "She brings the sea with her," whispered the old auntie, crossing herself and pushing salt under the door. "This boy is cursed. You all are." So they left again. They wandered, from village to village, turned away more often than not. The boy stopped speaking entirely. His eyes no longer met theirs. And still, the water followed. Sometimes it came as mist, sometimes as a puddle in the middle of a dry floor. Once, as a dead fish in the child's bed, Kofi was breaking. He woke one night screaming from a dream, except it hadn't been a dream. His ears were wet, his tongue tasted like salt, and in the corner of the room, standing waist-deep in a puddle that hadn't been there before, was a woman. She was impossibly beautiful. Her skin dark and glistening, her eyes silver and still. Her hair moved like seaweed, floating around her shoulders though there was no wind. She said nothing, but Kofi knew who she was, Mami Wata. She raised her hand and pointed to the boy. Kofi lunged forward, shielding his son with his body. "No!" he screamed. "You can't have him!" Her head tilted, curious. And then, slowly, she pointed again, this time at Kofi. He froze, and in that second, he understood. She never wanted the child. She wanted him. A wave of guilt, relief, and dread slammed into him all at once. He backed away, heart pounding, breath shallow. She blinked once and vanished. Adjoa rushed in moments later, holding a lantern. "What happened?" Kofi looked at her, face pale, body trembling. "I have to go back," he whispered. "To the water." "Why?" "Because she never wanted gold. She never wanted our son." Adjoa stared at him, breath caught. "Then what does she want?" Kofi's voice broke. "Me." The sea had swallowed the sun. The sky was black by the time Kofi reached the edge of the river, where the water met the open arms of the ocean. Clouds rolled low and heavy, and thunder rumbled like a warning from the gods. But he kept walking, feet bare, soaked with mud, carrying nothing but the weight of his own name. Behind him, Adjoa stood with their son wrapped tightly in her shawl. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She knew better now. There were no words that could stop what had already been claimed. Kofi stepped into the water, slow at first. The cold wrapped around his ankles like vines, pulling gently, almost tenderly. "I know why you chose me," he said to the sea. "I wanted too much. I thought I could take what I didn't earn." The wind howled in response, spraying his face with salt. "I thought if I gave you what you wanted, it would end with gold. That you'd forget me." He waded deeper. "But you don't forget. You remember every drop." The river swelled around his waist now, pulling harder. The current was alive. He felt it in his blood. Recognition. The pact wasn't carved in stone. It had been carved into him. "Mama Ebeli said you gave me fortune," he whispered. "But you gave me yourself." He took another step, and the ground vanished beneath his feet. He didn't struggle. He let the river carry him. And she came. From beneath the dark, glassy surface, she rose. Mami Wata. Her eyes were not angry. They were ancient. Her beauty was not soft. It was sacred, cruel, full of forgotten promises and old gods. Her arms opened like waves, and he floated toward her, weightless. Kofi looked at her no longer with fear, but with understanding. "You asked for a man," he said, "and I gave you a mask, a shell full of hunger." She touched his face, and then he disappeared. Just like that. No splash, no scream. The river stilled, the wind died, and silence fell. By morning, the village was still. The tide had receded farther than anyone could remember. Fishermen found the shoreline littered with seaweed and shells that shimmered like glass, and lying on the sand, wrapped in a faded cloth, was the boy, alive, sleeping peacefully, as if nothing had touched him. Adjoa stood nearby, her eyes hollow, her hands clasped in prayer, though she didn't know to whom. She never saw Kofi again, but she felt him. In the hush of the waves, in the cry of the gulls, in the sudden silence before the wind turned. She returned inland with her son, choosing a quiet life, far from the reach of the sea. But sometimes, on nights when the tide was high and the stars were hidden, she would sit outside and listen. The ocean would sing, not a hymn, not a curse, but a song, low and deep, a voice she knew, a man who had once asked for everything and gave everything in return, and those who heard the legend would say, "The river does not forget, the ocean does not forgive, and the gods always collect. If you walk too close to the tide and you hear your name on the wind, walk away, or answer and be claimed. Some blessings come wrapped in gold, but carry the weight of your soul." Kofi's story reminds us that not all fortune is worth the price we pay in silence, in blood, in love. Sometimes, what we ask for too quickly is what breaks us slowly. Would you have made the same choice he did? Tell us in the comments. What is a blessing and what is a curse? And don't go far. The next story is already waiting for you on the screen. Hit play and dive into another tale where secrets never stay buried.